Hey everyone, welcome back to all my listeners. This is episode 9 in season 18. Today is Wednesday, August 5th, 2026. My name is Sonal Patel, and this is the Paint the Medical Picture podcast series. All right, you guys. Well, thanks so much for coming back this week. I did take last week off. I was not in the recording studio for my very favorite episode. At the end of the month of July, I pushed that to air this week. So it is going to feature my Newsworthy fraud, waste, and abuse highlights for the month of July 2026. And just like I hinted at a couple weeks ago in terms of the proposed rule, I wanted to focus on a potential set of new ABA codes. There are 6 ABA proposals that I would like to talk about in Trusty Tip. And then, of course, in Spark, I'm going to go ahead and round out today's episode with a remarkable quote by Abraham Maslow. So let's get into Newsworthy, the month's fraud, waste, and abuse cases. Now, the month of July saw a whopping 65 cases as of the recording of this episode. So let's go ahead and check out some of the cases I want to spotlight. July saw Attorney General James announcing arrest of medical supply company owner for stealing more than $2.5 million from Medicaid. New York Attorney General Letitia James announced the arrest and indictment of a 36-year-old man of Hewlett, New York, for allegedly stealing more than $2.5 million from Medicaid through a fraud scheme that left children without the nutritional supplements they needed. An investigation by the Office of the Attorneys General, the OAG, Medicaid Fraud Control Unit, the MFUCU, found that from April 13th, 2023 through July 15th, 2025, the man submitted over 6,000 claims to Medicaid through his company, Duke Medical, Inc., for Pediasure with peptides, but did not purchase the vast majority of the product for which he submitted claims to Medicaid. He pocketed more than $2.5 million from Medicaid through his false billing scheme, which he used to buy luxury cars, including a Bentley and a Range Rover, and pay the mortgage on his Long Island mansion. The man and Duke Medical were charged with grand larceny, healthcare fraud, and scheme to defraud. Duke Medical is a medical supply company located in Brownsville, Brooklyn, that provides medical equipment and supplies. The OAG's investigation found that the man allegedly instructed office staff at pediatric practices to alter doctors' prescriptions for the basic Pediasure nutritional supplement and submit requests that would allow him to bill Medicaid for the more expensive and medically unnecessary Pediasure with peptides. Pediasure with peptides is intended only for children diagnosed with severe gastrointestinal issues. The man, through Duke Medical, allegedly submitted thousands of fraudulent reimbursement claims to Medicaid for cases of Pediasure with peptides that he never actually ordered. In fact, an OAG audit revealed that Duke Medical purchased only 10% of the amount for which the man billed Medicaid. As a result, Medicaid paid Duke Medical approximately $2.5 million for Pediasure with peptides that was not medically necessary and in many cases was not purchased or delivered by Duke Medical at all. The OAG's investigation found that Duke Medical's fraudulent scheme prevented some families in need from getting the formula their children's pediatricians had ordered, preventing them from receiving the care they needed. July also saw Maryland Oncology Practice agreeing to pay more than $1.4 million to resolve False Claims Act allegations of fraudulent billing. A Maryland Oncology Practice and its owner agreed to pay more than $1.4 million to settle fraudulent billing allegations. Progressive Oncology and Hematology, LLC, an oncology practice offering chemotherapy services in Frederick, Maryland, and its owner and sole MD provider agreed to pay the United States $1.45 million to resolve allegations that they violated the False Claims Act. According to the United States, Progressive and the man knowingly submitted claims to Medicare, Medicaid, and the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, the VA, for reimbursement for chemotherapy drugs that the defendants did not pay for. Specifically, the government alleges Progressive and the man submitted claims for reimbursement for drugs that came from charitable organizations or through grant programs for specific patients at no expense to the defendants. Additionally, the government further alleges Progressive and the man directed that wastage, or small amounts of extra medication from single-use vials of drugs intended for one patient, be split across two or more patients. The defendants then submitted claims as if each patient received their own single-use vial. It is also alleged that Progressive and the man billed federal and state health insurance programs for chemotherapy drugs that he prescribed but never administered to patients at the practice. The claims resolved by this settlement are allegations only, and there has been no determination of liability. July also saw Attorney General William Tong announced a over $710,000 settlement with Trading Spaces ABA LLC, a now defunct former provider of autism behavioral services, and its owner, resolving allegations under the Connecticut False Claims Act that Trading Spaces and the owner knowingly submitted or caused the submission of false or fraudulent claims for payment to the Connecticut Medical Assistance Program, or CMAP, which includes the Connecticut Medicaid program for autism treatment services that were not provided. An investigation led to allegations in the state's civil enforcement action regarding the owner and Trading Spaces billing conduct between January 2017 and December 2021. During this period, the man was licensed and enrolled as a provider in the CMAP as a board-certified behavioral analyst and was the sole owner of Trading Spaces, an autism specialty group located in Glastonbury. The state's civil lawsuit alleged that the man and Trading Spaces billed and received reimbursement from the CMAP for providing behavioral treatment services to beneficiaries under 21 years of age diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, even though there were no patient records or notes to support those claims. The civil settlement follows a criminal investigation and prosecution by the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit, the MFUCU, in the office of the chief state's attorney. The man pleaded no contest to charges relating to defrauding the Connecticut Medicaid program and was sentenced in Hartford Superior Court on June 4, 2026, at which time he paid over $102,000 in criminal restitution. The civil settlement amount represents treble damages and civil per-claim penalties under the Connecticut False Claims Act based on the claims and patients that were the subject of the criminal conviction. On July 2nd, 2026, North Shore University Health System in Evanston, Illinois, entered into a $105,000 settlement agreement with the OIG. The settlement agreement resolves allegations that North Shore violated the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, otherwise known as EMTALA. Based on their investigation, the OIG concluded that back in February of 2025, North Shore failed to provide an appropriate medical screening examination to a 64-year-old patient who presented to North Shore's emergency department with a chief complaint of leg pain and nausea. The patient was registered at 10:53 a.m. and triaged at 11:15 a.m. The triage examination included taking his vitals, which revealed a tachycardic heart rate of 126, or a fast heart rate, and he was assigned a Emergency Severity Index, or ESI, level of 2. This is an emergency triage category for patients who are not dying right now, but face a high risk of getting much worse, suffer from severe pain or distress, or show a new change in mental status. These types of patients need a quick medical evaluation, usually within 15 minutes. The patient was then placed in the waiting room in a wheelchair. North Shore did not reassess the patient or check his vitals until he was found slumped over and unresponsive in his wheelchair at 8:55 p.m. The patient was found to be in a cardiac arrest, and CPR was quickly initiated. July also saw founder and CEO and clinical president of digital health company sentenced to 72 months and 24 months, respectively, for a $90 million scheme to distribute over 37 million pills of Adderall. The founder and former female chief executive officer or CEO of Dunn Global Inc., a California-based digital mental health company, was sentenced to 6 years in prison and a fine of $1 million for orchestrating a scheme that used her company's technology platform, compensation structure, and clinical protocols to unlawfully distribute over 37 million pills of Adderall, defraud insurers of over $12 million, and obstruct the federal investigation that followed. The defendant spent over $40 million on social media advertisements to deceive Americans into believing they had attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, falsely diagnosing patients with ADHD and distributing Adderall, including 2 patients who the company was warned were suffering from Adderall psychosis, bipolar depression, anxiety, and other mental health conditions that were worsened by stimulant prescriptions. The goal of the conspiracy was to obtain an over $1 billion valuation by fueling user growth through a subscription for prescription business model, whereby patients paid a monthly fee for prescriptions that were automatically refilled and obtained through a frictionless technology platform. Co-defendant and Dunn's former clinical president was separately sentenced to 2 years in prison and a fine of $1 million. Evidence at trial showed that the defendants used a combination of carrots and sticks to cause unnecessary prescriptions. The defendants refused to hire or fired Dunn clinicians who did not participate in the conspiracy, while paying up to $60,000 per month to clinicians who signed Adderall prescriptions every 30 seconds. The defendants pressured clinicians to diagnose ADHD in initial visits capped at half the length of a typical examination, and pressured them to prescribe stimulants to patients who the clinicians did not believe had ADHD or who were at risk for serious side effects. The defendants also used an auto refill platform technology feature after an initial diagnosis to minimize follow-up appointments, where prescribers signed prescriptions for Adderall based on an automatically generated message that a patient desired a refill. Because of these policies, some patients went years without seeing clinicians who continually authorized refills, even through involuntary psychiatric holds or after the patients had died. The former clinical president himself personally wrote prescriptions for 394,324 Schedule II stimulant pills prescribed to 6,559 Dunn members who were complete strangers to him. He never evaluated them or even reviewed a single patient record. He even admitted that, quote, it only took him 30 seconds per refill, end quote, prescription, because he never checked patients' medical records. As he told the former female CEO and founder, his dream job at Dunn would allow him to make money, quote, without ever having to see or talk to the patients, end quote. The man encouraged Dunn's practitioners to disregard the widely accepted DSM-5 criteria. He described these addictive substances to Dunn employees as candy that Dunn providers handed out like Santa Claus. He acknowledged that Dunn's practices were, quote, on the edge of the law, remarking that people who were, quote, really into the law were not his cup of tea. When one prescriber expressed concerns about the legality of Dunn's prescribing practices, he said that he should prescribe stimulants to patients, quote, no matter what, and not worry about going to jail, end quote. In order to ensure that members continued paying monthly subscription fees, the pair and others conspired to defraud insurers so that Dunn members would be able to use insurance to pay for Adderall dispensed at pharmacies. The pair and others submitted false and fraudulent prior authorization requests to insurers, which claimed that Dunn followed the DSM-5 criteria in diagnosing ADHD, utilized urine drug screens, and falsely claimed that non-stimulants had previously been tried without success. As a result, Medicare, Medicaid, and the commercial insurers paid in excess of approximately $12.3 million. In 2022, faced with scrutiny from the media, the pair lied about Dunn's policies. When national pharmacy chains began blocking Dunn prescriptions due to safety concerns, the duo falsely claimed to have robust compliance measures to ensure the pills kept flowing. Internal documents showed that the former CEO and founder ultimately created a second entity, Mindful Mental Wellness, specifically to bypass pharmacy blocks and continue dispensing stimulants. The healthcare fraud unit's investigation reached beyond the individual clinicians writing the prescriptions to examine how corporate decision makers controlled its operations. To obstruct the government's investigation, the evidence at trial showed that she moved operations in China to make personnel and evidence unavailable. After receipt of the grand jury subpoena issued to Dunn, she instructed Dunn employees to move to encrypted messaging applications, such as Signal and WhatsApp, to discuss sensitive company business instead of using official company platforms that were being collected by Dunn's attorneys for production to the government. She also turned on disappearing messages in her communications with Dunn colleagues, rendering it impossible to obtain such messages. She also personally deleted and directed employees to delete incriminatory documents and messages from the company servers. As the investigation closed in, she continued to move assets and company operations abroad. She researched non-extradition countries on her MacBook and saved a screenshot of the results. In February of 2023, agents intercepted her on the way to the airport, bound for a flight to Hong Kong. She surrendered her passport and was warned that leaving the country would result in arrest. 4 months later, however, she secretly obtained a Chinese travel document that would allow her to travel to China, a fact that she concealed from the court and law enforcement following her arrest, and that ultimately led to her pretrial detention due to her risk of flight. She also set up a shell company, Make Believe Asia, and transferred millions of dollars to China. In November, the pair were both convicted of 1 count of conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, 4 counts of distribution of controlled substances, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud. She was also convicted of 1 count of conspiracy to obstruct justice. July also saw medical company owner convicted of $30 million Medicare fraud scheme. A federal jury in the Middle District of Florida convicted an Oklahoma business owner and chiropractor yesterday for his role in a year-long scheme that attempted to bilk Medicare, TRICARE, and the Civilian Health and Medical Program of the Department of Veterans Affairs, or CHAMP-VA, out of over $30 million by purchasing patient information, medical practitioner signatures, and doctor's orders for orthotic braces and glucose monitors that patients did not want or need. According to court documents and evidence presented at trial, a 39-year-old man of Cushing, Oklahoma, paid over $1 million to marketers who worked with call centers to persuade elderly and disabled Americans to provide their personal information, including their health insurance information. The man and his co-conspirators then used that information to obtain signed orders for orthotic braces and continuous glucose monitors that were generated by telemedicine doctors and nurse practitioners who never examined and often never spoke to the patients. He and his co-conspirators used these doctors' orders to bill federal healthcare programs. The man also concealed a conspirator's management role in his company and his billing of claims generated by other unenrolled medical suppliers. In total, he obtained over $8 million from the false and fraudulent claims. He continued the scheme for 3 years, despite receiving a steady stream of complaints from beneficiaries and family members of those patients who reported that their elderly parents suffered from dementia and Alzheimer's disease, making them especially vulnerable to the sales tactics of his co-conspirators. The jury convicted the man of conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud and wire fraud. He is scheduled to be sentenced on October 7th, 2026, and faces a maximum penalty of 20 years in prison. A federal district court judge will determine any sentence after considering the U.S. sentencing guidelines and other statutory factors. July also saw Coeur d'Alene physician sentenced to 40 months imprisonment and $1.25 million in restitution for involvement in fraudulent telemedicine fraud scheme. On July 8th, 2026, a 70-year-old physician was sentenced to a 40-month term of imprisonment in federal prison for his role in a nationwide telemarketing conspiracy to defraud Medicare. This prison term will be followed by a 3-year term of court supervision. He was convicted after a jury trial in September 2025 of 16 felony counts, including conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and multiple counts of healthcare fraud, wire fraud, and false statements relating to healthcare matters. The judge also ordered the doctor to pay restitution in the full amount he defrauded from Medicare, roughly over $1.25 million, and ordered forfeiture in the form of a money judgment of over $37,000, which is the amount which he directly profited from the fraudulent scheme. At trial in September 2025, the United States presented evidence that between February of 2018 and September of 2019, the physician, a licensed Washington physician, participated in a scheme and conspiracy to obtain millions of dollars by falsely billing Medicare for medically unnecessary genetic tests and durable medical equipment, including back, knee, shoulder, and ankle braces. The evidence at trial showed that while contracting with the fraudulent telemedicine and telemarketing company Real Time Physicians, LLC, the doctor signed false and fraudulent orders for genetic tests and braces for elderly Medicare patients that he had never seen, spoken to, heard of, or had any contact with whatsoever, and which included deceased patients as well as elderly patients who had no limbs for the braces they were prescribed. He also reviewed the real-time prescriptions for, on average, 26 seconds before signing them and falsely attesting to their medical necessity. Real-Time paid him $20 for each phony prescription he falsely certified to be used to fraudulently bill Medicare. At the sentencing hearing, the judge remarked that while working for Real-Time, the doctor performed no legitimate medical work and did not exercise any independent medical judgment. Doctors, like lawyers and judges, the judge pointed out, are trained to protect and maintain their licenses, protect their clients, and protect the system in which they operate. And he failed to do that by essentially selling his medical license through his signature. The judge further agreed with the United States that through and even after trial, the physician has been, quote, steadfastly unapologetic, end quote, for his actions. July also saw 3 individuals sentenced to prison for fraudulently billing Medicare and Medicaid through opioid addiction treatment clinics in Kentucky. A Texas businessman, a Kentucky doctor, and a Kentucky woman were sentenced to prison for their roles in fraudulently billing Medicare and Kentucky Medicaid over $4.8 million through a series of addiction treatment facilities. A 53-year-old man of Houston, Texas, was sentenced to 48 months in prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. A 62-year-old MD of Paintsville, Kentucky, was sentenced to 60 months in prison. And finally, a 63-year-old female of West Van Leer, Kentucky, was sentenced to 24 months in prison. All 3 defendants were ordered to pay restitution of upwards of $812,000. According to evidence presented at trial, the trio orchestrated their healthcare fraud scheme through Kentucky Addiction Centers, or KAC, which operated in Winchester, Paducah, Paintsville, and London, Kentucky. As part of his role as KAC's medical director, one man prescribed Suboxone, a controlled substance that is used to treat opioid addiction. The MD served as KAC's CEO, and the female served as KAC's billing manager. Together, the trio ran a scheme that falsely billed taxpayer-funded health programs like Medicare and Medicaid for medical services that were not provided or were billed as more complex and more expensive services than the services patients actually received. They also conspired to falsely bill for services in the name of the man's elderly father, when the services either were not provided at all or were provided by the MD, who was unable to bill certain health plans as he was not credentialed as a provider with those plans. The trio also conspired to use the MD's father's prescribing credentials, including his DEA registration number and electronic prescribing token, to prescribe Suboxone, even though the MD father had not seen patients for whom he was supposedly issuing prescriptions. In March of 2025, the trio were each convicted at trial of conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud, 8 counts of healthcare fraud, and conspiracy to distribute controlled substances using the registration number of another person. The MD and the female were also convicted of 2 counts of aggravated identity theft. July also saw Addiction Recovery Care and affiliates agree to pay $16.2 million civil judgment to resolve Medicaid fraud allegations. Addiction Recovery Care LLC, or ARC, and its affiliates Pioneer Health Group LLC and Science Hill Family Care LLC have agreed to a civil judgment of over $16.2 million in favor of the United States to resolve allegations that they defrauded the Kentucky Medicaid program. Now, ARC, headquartered in Louisa, Kentucky, operates residential and outpatient drug rehabilitation facilities throughout the state. Along with its affiliates, ARC offers behavioral health care and medical health care services to patients at their rehabilitation facilities. The judgment announced by the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Office of the Kentucky Attorney General is part of a civil settlement resolving allegations that ARC and its affiliates violated the False Claims Act, a federal statute that prohibits the submission of false claims for payment to government programs, including the Medicaid program. In April of 2023, the current and former employees of ARC filed a QI-TAM complaint alleging that ARC defrauded the Kentucky Medicaid program by submitting fraudulent claims for a payment for behavioral health services provided in their drug rehabilitation programs. Under the QI-TAM provisions of the False Claims Act, a citizen can file a civil action on behalf of the United States to bring allegations of fraud to the government's attention. The United States thereafter opened a civil investigation into whether ARC violated the False Claims Act. During the government's investigation, ARC self-disclosed to the government that it should not have billed for some of its services, including services identified by the whistleblowers in the QI-TAM complaint. According to the settlement agreement, the government alleged that ARC falsely represented the qualification of some of their clinicians on claims to Kentucky Medicaid in order to receive higher reimbursements. From January of 2018 to March of 2024, some of ARC's behavioral health services, such as psychotherapy, psychiatric evaluations, and mental health assessments, allegedly were provided by lower-level healthcare workers, but billed as if ARC's employees had higher-level licenses. Similarly, from July of 2019 through mid-June of 2021, the government alleged that ARC falsely represented that it provided individual group therapy sessions, which Kentucky paid at a higher rate, when ARC in fact provided less expensive group therapy sessions. These alleged overstatements of provider qualifications and individualized care, which are commonly referred to as upcoding, are not allowed by federal health insurance programs and caused ARC and its affiliates to receive higher payments to which they were not entitled. In addition to ARC's purported upcoding practices, the government alleged that from January of 2019 through December of 2024, ARC's affiliates billed duplicate office visits to Kentucky Medicaid and billed for office visits that were already reimbursed under an inclusive per diem rate. One of ARC's affiliates also allegedly charged for care management services that did not meet Kentucky Medicaid's coverage requirements, including services performed by ARC employees who lacked the necessary credentials. The civil judgment and settlement agreement resolved the QI-TAM case, which was recently unsealed by the court. The amount of the judgment, which will be paid over several years, was negotiated and reduced due to the defendant's financial condition and prospects for ongoing operations. As part of this resolution, the individuals who filed the QI-TAM complaint are eligible to receive a portion of the settlement proceeds. The claims resolved by the settlement here are allegations only. There has been no determination of liability. And July saw Fraud Division resolves fraud investigation of eye care group under new corporate enforcement policy. Healthcare executive charged for alleged fraud and kickbacks. The National Fraud Enforcement Division announced the resolution of a criminal healthcare fraud investigation into Campus Eye Management Holdings, LLC, and its wholly owned subsidiary, Campus Eye Management, LLC, collectively known as Campus Eye, pursuant to Part 1 of the Department of Justice Corporate Enforcement and Voluntary Self-Disclosure Policy, or CEP. The department declined to prosecute Campus Eye, a management services organization that provided billing and other services to an optometry practice and ambulatory surgery center, or ASC, for healthcare fraud, illegal kickbacks and bribes, and conspiracy after it voluntarily self-disclosed the misconduct, fully cooperated with the department's investigation, and timely and appropriately remediated the wrongdoing. As part of the resolution, Campus Eye agreed to pay back $1 million to victims. Separately, the department announced a 7-count indictment against the founder of the optometry practice and ASC for his role in orchestrating diagnostic testing and kickback schemes, both prior to and after he and outside investors formed Campus Eye back in December of 2021, and he became the CEO. According to court documents from at least 2015 through March of 2023, the 71-year-old man of Princeton, New Jersey, allegedly conspired with others to defraud Medicare by billing for unnecessary diagnostic eye tests. The man allegedly paid kickbacks and bribes to ophthalmologists in exchange for their referral of patients who needed eye surgeries, and then subjected the patients to diagnostic tests that were duplicative of tests they had previously received or were unnecessary for the type of surgery being performed. As alleged, neither he nor the optometrist reviewed the tests, and in most instances, the ophthalmologist did not review or rely on the tests to inform their treatment decisions in advance of surgery. According to the indictment, the man concealed the payment of kickbacks and bribes by creating sham agreements that described the payments as consulting fees and paying in the form of monthly flat fees that were actually based on a percentage of the optometry practice's Medicare reimbursement for diagnostic tests performed on patients the providers had referred in the previous year. The man allegedly caused the submission of approximately $3.4 million in fraudulent claims to Medicare, of which Medicare then paid approximately $1 million. The man then marketed and sold Campus Eye to private equity investors based in part on the lucrative reimbursements he received from Medicare. The department resolved its investigation into Campus Eye after considering the factors set forth in the CEP, including number 1, Campus Eye's timely and voluntary self-disclosure of the misconduct, number 2, Campus Eye's full and proactive cooperation in the matter, and its agreement to continue to cooperate with any ongoing government investigations and prosecutions. 3, the nature and seriousness of the offense. 4, Campus Eye's timely and appropriate remediation, including internal review and subsequent revision of certain billing, payment, and compensation policies, and substantial improvement of its compliance program by, among other things, conducting ongoing risk assessments and monitoring, hiring new personnel with compliance responsibilities, and implementing compliance trainings. 5th, the absence of aggravating factors that, when weighed against Campus Eye's cooperation and remediation, warrant a disposition other than a resolution under Part 1 of the CEP. And finally, 6th, the fact that Campus Eye agreed to compensate the victims. Now, this is the department's first declination of a healthcare company under the new department-wide Corporate Enforcement Policy, or CEP, that was announced by Acting Attorney General Blanche on March 10th of 2026, following the uptick of corporate enforcement actions against healthcare companies by the department in recent years. Now, the man is charged with 1 count of conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud, 1 count of conspiracy to violate the anti-kickback statute, 2 counts of healthcare fraud, and 3 counts of payment of illegal healthcare kickbacks. If convicted, he faces a maximum penalty of 10 years in prison on the healthcare fraud conspiracy and substantive healthcare fraud counts, 5 years in prison on the kickback conspiracy count, and 10 years in prison for each of the substantive kickback counts. An indictment is merely an allegation. All defendants here are presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. And now it's time for my best practice tips in Trusty Tip. Now, I wanted to circle back on the Medicare physician fee schedule, that MPFS proposed rule for calendar year 2027 that I highlighted 2 weeks ago. Now, I did stress in that episode that I would go over the 6 new ABA codes that may take effect on January 1st of 2027. Now, all of that information was announced by CMS in the 2027 new and revised CPT codes for adaptive behavior services that are found in the rather massive PDF document that I outlined a couple weeks ago. Now, specifically, this ABA information is found on those PDF pages 146 through 149. Now, CMS comments on the new and revised CPT codes for adaptive behavior services were approved by the CPT editorial panel back in September of 2025. However, please note that these particular codes, these 6 new codes, are only proposed codes, right? They're not technically official until they are released in the 2027 CPT Professional Edition Codebook that will be released by the AMA. So we've got to wait until the final rule drops, roughly in late fall, early December. I know that the CPT books are already printed before then, but we will find out and see if these 6 new ABA codes are going to actually take effect on January 1st of 2027. So let's just go over what is detailed in those PDF pages for the proposed rule. Now, they have 6 place marker codes. I'm not going to read them to you, but they are in the 97,000 code range, and they are marked with X's. So there's not a full 5-digit marker for these codes, but they are in the 97,000 code range for these types of ABA services. But the definitions that CMS did disclose in the proposed rule is for behavior identification, supporting assessment of harmful behavior, each 15 minutes of technician time, face-to-face with a patient, requiring the following components: delivered by 2 technicians for a patient who exhibits harmful behavior, conducted in an environment that is customized to the patient's behavior. Now, the next code that is proposed is for behavior identification, supporting assessment of harmful behavior, additional technicians present each 15 minutes. Now, the third proposed code for these ABA services are for adaptive behavior non-face-to-face services, personally performed by a physician or other qualified healthcare professional each 15 minutes with any of the following elements. When performed, review and analysis of data and session notes on patient treatment targets, clinical decision-making regarding the need to modify treatment targets, goals, or protocols, and or making those modifications, clinical decision-making regarding the need for additional assessment and developing or modifying assessment protocols, developing discharge or transition plans, training on or reviewing treatment targets, and or revised assessment or treatment protocols with technicians. Now, the fourth proposed new code is for adaptive behavior treatment of harmful behavior, each 15 minutes of technician time with a patient, requiring the following components: delivered by 2 technicians for a patient who exhibits harmful behavior, conducted in an environment that is customized to the patient's behavior. And the fifth code proposed is for adaptive behavior treatment of harmful behavior, each additional technician present each 15 minutes. And finally, that sixth proposed new ABA code is for adaptive behavior treatment with analysis, administered by physician or other qualified healthcare professional, face-to-face with 1 patient each 15 minutes. Now, CMS is proposing to maintain those CPT codes and those ones that we are well aware of, 97151 through 97158, on the permanent telehealth coverage list for 2027. Now, CMS did not, however, make any comments in the proposed rule regarding whether the 6 proposed new codes would be included in that permanent telehealth coverage list. And finally, in this week's inspiring quote in Spark is from Abraham Maslow. In any given moment, we have two options: to step forward into growth or step back into safety. So very true, right? I love this quote. It inspires us to push through fear. As leaders in our own lives, I believe there must be need for adaptability and change. As leaders, it's crucial to move the needle and advance. If we stay comfortable and safe, we risk not knowing what could have been. I'm happy Abraham Maslow's spark still burns brightly and inspires so very many. All right, you guys. Well, that wraps up today's episode. I hope you guys take the time to go back to the fraud, waste, and abuse cases for the month of July 2026. I picked some really, really good ones. So make sure you take the time to go back and listen to them in detail, because I know it was a bonanza month for the month of July. So there are many, many more that you guys can feel free to take your time and read them on the OIG website. But I really wanted to spotlight these particular cases that involved behavioral health, addiction centers, opiates, etc. All right, you guys. Well, that wraps up today's episode. Really hope you guys got a lot out of the month of July's fraud, waste, and abuse cases. I know I loved delivering those press releases to you hot off the press. I thought those are really good cases to take back to your organizations and see how you could improve your compliance programs, how to improve your billing practices, how to better protect practices at large. I think the month-end cases that I highlight really do provide a roadmap, right, for what not to do for our practitioners, organizations, and entities. So really take the time, replay this episode again and again if you need to, especially for those cases that might pertain to your specialty, especially for those ophthalmology, optometry type of practices, as well as our DME types of practices, our telehealth, telemarketing, as well as, of course, our behavioral health spaces, right? All of those opioids that you are prescribing. We have to make sure that you are following the prescription guidelines, all of the standards of medicine, right? I think the OIG does a really, really great job in delivering us all the education as well. Not just the legal speak that goes on, but they really do provide a lot of valuable healthcare compliance information that are embedded into their press releases. So I always find them to be educational tools that I can take back to my clients that I serve. I really do find that they are just nuggets of information that I can take back to my various providers so I can do a better job of delivering them education and information that they can take up to their C-suite. They can talk to their boards of directors. They can make sure that they are doing all of the right things to keep themselves buttoned up and safe and sound, right? So they're not caught in the crosshairs of these types of audits or these types of investigations. So really hope my audience got a lot out of today's rather lengthy episode, but hey, we had a lot of cases in the month of July to unpack. And then in my trusty tip, I really hope those of us that are in the audience that have providers that are in the ABA type of space, or have clients that they serve that are ABA types of providers, or you are an educational professional and you need to develop your presentations. I hope this really takes you a long way as well, because, fingers crossed, these 6 CPT codes were approved by the editorial panel at the CPT back in September of 2025. So I really do think that these additional codes would round out the 7 that we already have to work with. I think they will round things out very, very nicely, especially since I'm auditing ABA claims and documentation all the time. As I was reading the proposed rule and the code definitions, I do think that they will be very, very useful addition to the services that I do see in documentation. They will better support documentation that I have been seeing. Like these types of codes, these 7 that exist, don't really support all of the work that is going on and is being documented that I see. So I think these new codes, if they are finally approved in late fall of 2026 to be rolled out by January 1st, 2027, I think it'll be a nice amalgam of new codes for the ABA space. So fingers crossed, I welcome them. I loved as I read through those definitions. I think they will apply very, very nicely to the practitioners that I serve. So I think it's a very, very good thing. But we shall see. And then we shall see how, slow all of the payers are to adopt them, or what nuances they also will have. So there's much more in the works than just the proposed rule that will come out in the late fall. The various commercial payers too have to then develop more policies on their own and make sure that those take effect for their spaces as well, for the Medicare Advantage as well as those commercial spaces. So, lots of work to do here in the months ahead for the payers as well. And then, of course, all of us in the educational, compliance, professional end of things, the business side of things, we too then have to jump on board and make sure that our clients are up to speed on all of the new changes that are forever happening, because this is healthcare. That is the only constant we have. It is change. So anyways, you guys, I hope you got a lot out of the episode today, and I really appreciate all your time with me. Hopefully next week's episode can be shorter. I don't really know. It will focus on the OIG work plan. So hopefully they're taking a rest and it can just be a shorter episode next week. We shall see. But anyways, you guys, I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful week ahead and a great start to the month of August. So I hope you guys have a great, great week ahead and enjoy what is left of summer. Enjoy the next few weeks. Carve out time for yourselves. Don't make it all about work. Get into those pools. Take that lakeside vacation. Make a plan to have some fun. Life is too short. All right, you guys. Well, I wish you all a very, very happy week ahead. Thank you so much for listening on today's episode, and I hope every week with me brings you closer to helping your providers paint a masterpiece. See you next Wednesday.